This happens in 1992, where 32-year-old magician Joseph Burroughs claims to be the next Harry Houdini, but greater. He was going to do one of Houdini's greatest escapes, being buried alive. And this was going to propel him to stardom and fame, and he'll be more famous than Harry Houdini, so he believed. Now, what went wrong? This guy got himself handcuffed and put into a coffin. A homemade coffin. It was made of plexiglass, so, people could see him inside. He's handcuffed, put inside his homemade coffin, and lowered into the hole in the ground, the grave, lowered into the grave. He's 6 feet down. They cover him with 3 feet of dirt and another 3 feet of wet concrete. This totals over 7 tons. You can see them, they lower him in there, they put the dirt on, all this wet concrete over top, and as soon as it sort of fills up, the truck pulls away and you see the whole thing just sink. It just goes whoosh. It is the most gut-wrenching scene of all time, seeing that thing just whoosh. Apparently the crowd could hear the cracking of the plexiglass. The ground crew, they're working their ass off, they're digging them out, trying to get them out, right? But you're trying to move 7 tons. It's too much, it's so deep, it's so thick, it's wet, it's heavy. Unfortunately, they don't get there fast enough, and Joseph Burroughs dies. Now, I understand the desire to want to be famous and propelled to the heights of Harry Houdini himself, but you gotta do your research. Number 2, Janika Beznaki. This guy's a Sri Lankan magician that moved to the US in 2010. In 2012, he attempts this great stunt, which sadly becomes his last stunt. He too is going to attempt to be buried alive. This one is slightly different. His idol here is David Blaine. And he's not trying to do the Harry Houdini buried alive escape. He wants to set a Guinness World Record for the longest person to ever be buried alive. Now in 1999, David Blaine stayed buried under the ground for 7 days. So that's the number this guy has to beat. How long was Janika buried for? 7.5 hours. What went wrong here? Well, when David Blaine attempts a stunt, he does all the research. More research than anybody. He literally goes to the best of the world and whatever that topic is and literally gets them to help him do it. That's how he does it. And even then, it's highly dangerous. This guy did not do that. Janika's coffin didn't break the way Joseph's did, okay? In fact, Janika had a very sturdy coffin, but that's all he had. He just had his family bury him 6 feet in the ground. They put the dirt on, and 7.5 hours later, they had to dig him up and take him to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. Now, when David Blaine attempts something like this, David Blaine's coffin is fully prepared. He has a way of having oxygen get pumped in. He has liquids in there to survive on. You see him, he has a pillow and a blanket. He's ready to be there for 7 days. And even then, it's an impossible feat. Janika didn't have any of these things. He didn't think it through. And in Janika's case, there's one more crazy thing here. That is that the Guinness World Records, the record he was trying to break, doesn't even recognize the record for being buried underground the longest. They just won't accept that as a record because, in their words, it's way too dangerous and they don't want people attempting it. Literally, Guinness World Records does not have this record because they're trying to prevent exactly this kind of thing from happening. I saved the craziest for last. This story is wild. It's crazy and it's so worth it. The Great Lafayette. This happens May 9th, 1911, okay? Now you're saying, Wes, who's the Great Lafayette? Well, let me tell you, back in the day, he was the highest paid performer of his time. He was making something like 50,000 pounds a year, which is like a multi-millionaire now for sure. It said to book him back then, it was a 10-year waiting period to book him. That's how booked up he was. As famous as you can get. He has a really good friend. You might have heard of him. His name's Harry Houdini. Yeah, he was really good friends with Harry Houdini. Harry Houdini gifted the Great Lafayette a dog. The Great Lafayette loved this dog. He loved it more than anything in the world, okay? This dog meant everything to him. And he had this dog for 15 years. Sadly, the dog died May 5th, 1911. But the show must go on. So the Great Lafayette takes the stage May 9th, 1911 in Edinburgh, a huge theater filled with 3,000 people. And he's doing his show and he is killing it. It is going extremely well. Now, about halfway through the show, one of the lanterns he has as decor up on the stage here sets the curtain on fire, okay? Now the audience doesn't freak out right away because the Great Lafayette was known for his special effects and going over the top, spending all the money to make these things just amazing and wonderful and impossible. So they see this fire and they're just like, oh, this is amazing. So no one's really freaking out yet until the fire spreads across the curtain and the top curtain falls down and sets everything ablaze on the stage. That's when people know, oh, I think we better go. The whole place gets evacuated and they did a great job. There's 3,000 audience members and they all got out. That's pretty good, for when a theater's on fire to get everybody out. But 10 people still died. Who were those people? This is where the idiocy comes in. All of the Great Lafayette stagehands died. You know why? That's because he had locked them in. He had locked all of the doors backstage. So the stagehands, they couldn't get out. The reason he locked them is he was afraid someone might try and sneak in and see how his illusions work and steal his ideas and his methods and stuff. It's so crazy to me. You think someone's going to steal your methods? Your precious little magic tricks? 10 of your stagehands died because they couldn't get out because of a fire. So the 3,000 audience members, they all get out safely. Awesome. Very happy to hear about that. The Great Lafayette also makes it out, unharmed. But he turns around to go back inside. You're saying, oh, Wes, he's going back inside because he's trying to save his stagehands and unlock the door and he knows they're trapped back there. No, he's going back to save his horse. He had lots of animals in his act, tiger, horse, all that stuff. This horse is a very valuable part of the act. Forget the 10 stagehands he has back there. He's going back to save his horse. And sadly, he does not save the horse. The horse and him both perish in the fire, along with all the stagehands. But the story's still not over. It gets crazier. The fire burned for several hours. And finally, after it's all done, they start uncovering people and, unfortunately, pulling out bodies. They pull out the Great Lafayette. There he was, next to the horse. A tragedy by all measures. Now they have a funeral for the Great Lafayette. Harry Houdini made sure it was a big thing. A horse-drawn carriage with a huge parade. 250,000 people turned out to show their respect. And they buried the Great Lafayette with his beloved dog. That's as good an ending as anyone could hope for. But back at the site of the burnt theater, they were obviously still clearing the debris, and I mean, it's a huge theater that burned to the ground. It's going to take a long time to clean up. So they're clearing debris and everything, and they're pulling out pieces. The normal procedure when a building burns down. And they pull up part of the burnt out stage, and underneath the stage, they find the burnt up body of the Great Lafayette. What? The Great Lafayette. His body is under the stage. The one they found before was not the Great Lafayette. It was his double. Back in the day, a magician like the Great Lafayette would use a double or a look-alike to pull off some of his amazing feats. I vanish from here, I reappear here, and possibly because he had a look-alike. So they buried his look-alike with his dog. So after they identify the guy under the floor as the real Great Lafayette, now they have to go back to the burial plot and they have to dig up the other guy and put him back in, so now he's with his dog. It's a crazy ending to a crazy story. That's 3 stories, each just as stupid, crazy, and sad as the one before it, but there are lessons to be learned. I hope we learned them. Seriously, don't risk your life in hopes of being famous. Do your research. Don't lock people